I never questioned who I was. Girls had always been my thing. Crushes in high school, messy college flings, the occasional heartbreak. My friends and I would joke about sexuality sometimes, but it was just that, a joke. I knew where I stood. Or at least, I thought I did. Then there was Ryan. We'd been friends for years, the kind of bond that formed without effort. He was the one I called when things fell apart, the guy who showed up unannounced with beer and bad advice when I needed it. Our friendship was solid, easy, uncomplicated. And yet there were moments. Like the time we were at a bar, and some drunk guy muttered something about us being a cute couple. Ryan had just laughed, slapping me on the back. "You wish," he had joked. I had laughed too. But later that night, as I lay in bed, something about the way he had looked at me lingered. I had shaken it off. It was nothing. That's how it always was, little things, moments I dismissed as meaningless. Then one night, everything shifted. It had been a long day. Work had drained me, and I wasn't in the mood for company, but Ryan had a way of showing up anyway. "Come on, man. One drink," he had said, standing in my doorway with that familiar smirk. I sighed and let him in. We ended up sprawled on my couch, a half-finished bottle of whiskey between us. The conversation drifted, relationships, regrets, old memories. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan said, "Have you ever wondered?" I frowned. Wondered what? He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. If things were different. If we were different. Something in my chest tightened. I forced a laugh. "Ryan, I'm not that way inclined." He gave a small smile, something unreadable behind it. "Yeah," he said softly, taking a slow sip of his drink. "I know." The room felt smaller, like the air had thickened between us. I should have changed the subject, made a joke, anything to break whatever had just passed between us. But I didn't. I just sat there, feeling an unfamiliar unease settle in my bones. After a moment, Ryan stood. "I should go," he said, his voice unreadable. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, it's late." He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. Then he just smiled, tight-lipped, distant. "See you around." And then he was gone. I sat there long after the door clicked shut, staring at the empty glass in my hand. The words he had said, "If we were different," echoed in my mind. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. But I already knew something had shifted, and there was no going back. I convinced myself that night meant nothing. Ryan had always been the more introspective one, the kind of guy who overanalyzed things. Maybe it was just a passing thought, a late-night musing fueled by whiskey and nostalgia. I told myself that, over and over. But the next time I saw him, something felt off. It was at our usual spot, a quiet bar we'd claimed as our own over the years. Ryan was already there, nursing a drink, his fingers idly tracing patterns on the condensation of his glass. He looked up as I slid into the seat across from him, his expression unreadable. "Been a while," he said. I shrugged. "Work's been crazy." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. I had been avoiding him, unsure of why. He nodded, took a sip. Silence stretched between us, heavier than before. Then he smirked, the familiar cocky grin returning. "So, are we going to pretend that conversation never happened?" My stomach twisted. "What conversation?" I asked, too casually. He chuckled. "Right. That's how we're playing it." I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "You were drunk, man. You probably don't even remember what you said." Ryan leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes sharp. "I remember everything." The air between us changed. Again. I felt it, something crawling up my spine, something I didn't want to name. "Forget it," I muttered, reaching for my drink. But Ryan didn't let it drop. "Look, I'm not trying to mess with you," he said, his voice softer now. I saw something in you that night. A hesitation." I scoffed. "You saw wrong." He studied me for a moment, then nodded, like he was deciding whether to push further. Finally, he let out a breath and leaned back. "All right," he said. "Forget I said anything." But I couldn't. The rest of the night was normal, almost forced. We talked about sports, work, our usual banter, but something beneath it felt different. I caught myself watching him more closely, noticing things I hadn't before. The way his fingers drummed on the table when he was thinking, the way his smile faded too quickly when he looked away. And then, as we were leaving, it happened. The bar was nearly empty, the street outside quiet. We stood there for a second, the usual routine, our ways parted in different directions. But this time, Ryan hesitated. He looked at me, not like a friend, not like someone waiting for a casual goodbye. It was deeper than that, weighted with something I didn't want to face. "See you around," he said, voice low. I nodded, my throat tight. As he walked away, I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I could think was, why did I want him to stay? I was unraveling, and I hated it. For days, Ryan's words clung to me, slipping into my thoughts at the worst moments. I heard them in the quiet hum of my office, in the laughter of my friends, in the stillness of my empty apartment. I told myself it was nothing, that he was reading too much into things, that I was overthinking. But then why couldn't I shake it? To prove a point, to myself more than anyone, I threw myself into distractions. I went on dates, flirted harder, let my hands linger on women's waists at bars. I kissed a girl just last night, her lips soft, her laughter warm. But even then, my mind flickered to something else, to someone else, and I hated it. So when Ryan texted me that night, game night at my place, I almost didn't reply. But my fingers moved before I could stop them. Yeah, be there soon. His apartment was the same as always, dim lighting, a cluttered coffee table, the faint scent of cologne and old books. A few friends were there, half distracted by a basketball game on TV. It was familiar. Easy. At least, it should have been. Ryan was next to me, his knee barely brushing mine. I was hyper-aware of him. I forced myself to focus on the game, on the beer in my hand, on anything but the heat radiating off his body. Then at some point, someone made a joke, a stupid, drunken thing about how Ryan and I were practically inseparable. Seriously, one of the guys laughed. If I didn't know better, I'd think you two were. Shut up, I snapped too fast. Too sharp. Silence. Ryan shot me a look, something between surprise and hurt. I forced a smirk, shaking my head. You guys are idiots. The conversation moved on, but Ryan stayed quiet. Later, when everyone had left and it was just the two of us, I stood to leave. I should go. Ryan didn't move from the couch. Why are you running from this? My stomach twisted. From what? He gave me a knowing look. You're not as sure as you think you are. I clenched my fists. You don't know what you're talking about. Ryan exhaled, standing up, closing the space between us. His voice was low, careful. Then tell me, right now, that if I kissed you, you wouldn't feel anything. My breath hitched. It was a challenge, a dare wrapped in quiet certainty. My pulse pounded in my ears. I should have laughed, shoved him away, told him he was wrong. But I didn't move. And in that silence, we both had the answer. I turned, yanking open the door. I can't, I muttered before stepping into the night. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't be able to walk away. I didn't hear from Ryan for a week. At first, I told myself it was for the best. That things needed space. That whatever had cracked between us would seal itself over if we just let time do its work. But time wasn't helping. It was making things worse. The silence wasn't relief. It was suffocating. Every time my phone lit up, I half expected his name. Every time I walked into a bar, I glanced around, hoping, dreading, that he'd be there. I couldn't escape the weight of what I had walked away from. And then I saw him. It was at a cafe, one we used to go to. But he wasn't alone. A guy sat across from him, laughing at something Ryan had said. He leaned in slightly casual but intentional, the kind of body language that didn't need explanation. And Ryan, he was smiling, relaxed, his walls down in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Something sharp and unexpected twisted in my chest. Jealousy. I left without thinking, without waiting to be seen. My heart pounded the entire way home. I didn't get it. I had never been possessive. I had never looked at Ryan like that before. Had I? That night, I found myself at his door. I had no plan, No excuse, just a stomach full of regret and a heart racing too fast. When he opened it, his expression shifted, surprise, then hesitation, then something guarded. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed hard. "We need to talk." Ryan exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know if there's anything left to say. There was. There had to be. I forced the words out. "I messed up." His jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, the truth finally breaking free. "I don't know what it means or what I want. But I know that when I saw you with someone else today, I hated it. And I know that I can't stop thinking about you, even when I try." Ryan studied me for a long moment. Then his voice was quiet. "You don't get to play with this, with me. I'm not some experiment for you to figure yourself out." I nodded. "I know." Silence. Then, just when I thought I had lost him, he sighed. "You're a mess," he muttered. A small, humorless laugh left my lips. "Yeah." Ryan didn't move for a second. Then he took a step forward, hesitated, and finally reached for me. The first touch was tentative, as if waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. And just like that, everything changed. I had spent my whole life saying I wasn't that way inclined. Maybe I had been lying to myself all along.